right. So, hi everybody. So today, whatever it is, tonight we are here with author Linda Urban. I'd say middle grade author, but she's written other things besides middle grade. All kids books though. So kids book, let's say kidlit author Linda Urban. She is the author, as I said, of many award-winning, well-loved books for kids, including A Crooked Kind of Perfect, Road Trip with Max and His Mom, and Mouse Was Mad. And then also her newest middle grade book is Almost There and Almost Not. You can see here on Perfect Display, which just released last week, so super new. And she teaches writing for children and young adults at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and she has a small collection of etiquette books she probably ought to read more closely. So welcome, Linda. It's so nice to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Marielle. I'm so glad to be here with you this evening.
So yes, well, as you know, I am super excited about Almost There and Almost Not. But for those people that don't know what it is, because it did just come out, let's talk about the ins and outs of the book. So, and then like what is it about, and what was the initial spark that set you off on writing this story?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, Almost There and Almost Not is the story of California Poppy. This is California. This is the beautiful, beautiful cover by Charles Santoso. California is 11, but because she's a little bit taller, a little bit more mature, it's sometimes hard for people to see the 11 in her. And several years ago, her mother died, and her father has done his best to take care of her, but finds himself lacking and decides, he tells her, it would be better for him to go off and make some money in Alaska, doing a little salmon fishing. He's going to leave her with one aunt, who then leaves her with another. And she finds herself at Aunt Monica's home. Aunt Monica herself is grieving the loss of her own husband. And California needs a friend. And what appears? Actually, two. One, I'll show you, is this right here. This ghost dog, who is in Aunt Monica's yard. And secondarily, another ghost, Eleanor Fontaine, who appears at first very old, very dignified, and as an expert in etiquette from around the 1920s. There's more to say about her, but maybe that will come up in our conversation. But really, it is about how desperately dear California needs a place to belong and needs to be truly seen for who she is. And that gets explored through etiquette and letter writing and ghosts who are almost there and almost not, and some other adventures as well.
Yes, which I totally love. So, and that is like, it's such a great, wonderful story. It really is, guys. I can't even describe to you how much it is awesome. But so for you, like, so you kind of like, you explained the book, but like, how would you, as a bookseller, like we are always trying to sell the books that we love. So I kind of described it really quickly, Almost There and Almost Not. It's a heartbreaking and hopeful family story with ghosts.
So, I think that's perfect.
How would you sell it to like excited readers who are like, ooh, what should I read next?
And I think that's exactly perfect. And for me, it feels like realistic fiction. It's just that a couple of the characters happen to be not quite living. But all of the relationships for me are really realistic and really real and deep and rich. But I think that element of fantasy in an otherwise realistic story is part of what helps. Well, certainly it helps California come to understand herself and her situation better. What she's able to talk to these ghosts about, what she's able to eventually write about when she believes she's not actually sending the letters anymore, but they're working more as a diary for herself. That element of fantasy, both with ghosts and the fantasy that we create in our head that helps us process, I think that's really important, especially in middle grade literature. And it was a really fun thing for me to explore in this book as well. The sort of stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, the fantasies we construct that help us process. And it really, I think that's what all middle grade does for young readers. It helps them put themselves in some other world and process their own emotions and choices and dealing with difficult things and sorting out what they would do and how they'd feel and what they think is fair in the world and what might not be quite so fair.
That is wonderful, because I totally agree with that. I've always been a huge proponent of, for fiction is the best place for kids in the middle grade area, or really any kids, to deal with serious issues that they're dealing with that they might not have the words for. The fiction gives them like a safe haven. So it's like, oh, well, it's not real, it's fiction, but yet it gives you real life terminology that you can use. So yes, but talking about that and talking about California is, I love her. She is like someone I want her to just be like, to pop out of the book so I can hug her. That is what I want to do.
She would like that too.
And I love you so much. It's going to be okay. So, but she's also such a real, like, relatable character, I feel, to kids. And how did you go about like getting that like on the page, like creating her in this like relatable, real life kid role where she's not perfect, obviously. She's flawed, but she's flawed in a way that a normal kid would be. Like, real life kid. That's what I meant.
So what I would love to tell you, Marielle, is that like I have a 5-point checklist for creating real characters. And I do know writers who can approach their work that way, sort of from the outside in, right? Like they will make lists of all the things that are in the kid's bedroom and make a little timeline for all the things that they've experienced. And they will work from that. Who was it? Laurence Olivier, that liked to put all the costume on and then he would know what the character was, which is the opposite of method acting, right? Where where it comes from inside and then you determine like how it manifests physically. I am a method writer. And so all I can do, so usually when a book starts for me, it starts with voice. Words land on the page. So the first chapter of this is probably 95% what happened on the first day of writing. When I had no idea who California was or who these ghosts are and why there was a dead dog running around. I had no idea. I just wrote this first page, but I felt something true. And then the rest of the book is about honoring that, like feeling the questions from her about what she needs most and who she needs to be around her and how much she would love to step out of that book and just have someone hug her. Or in this case, all she wants is someone to even touch her hand, someone she wants to have touch her hand. And honestly, in COVID times, I mean, I wrote it before that, but I was doing the final edits during COVID and I felt that so strongly too, like just the physical presence of someone else, which is why the idea of a ghost that's almost there and almost not shows some of that yearning too, I think. But how to make her real, it's just about feeling her feelings. It's about tapping into the moments when, I think this is true for lots of writers, so I'll speak as we instead of just me. It's about remembering and deeply feeling the moments when we were alone, when we wanted nothing more than someone to truly see us and welcome us into whatever space we were in. I mean, I'm sure, Marielle, you remember moments when a teacher truly saw you.
Yeah.
Not just saw that you were behaving well or not just saw that you got a certain grade, but they truly saw you and said so and made it safe for you to be that version of yourself in that moment. That's all this poor sweet girl wants and needs. And that she has to get it from ghosts for a while to find a way to be okay with herself, to then make the other choices that she makes. That, I think that's a process so many kids go through. And honestly, I know that there's probably adults watching that we go through too. Every time we take a risk, every time we walk into, as if we're walking into rooms of strangers right now, but every time we walk into a room of strangers or a Zoom room or a Google Meet of strangers, we're wanting someone to say, I see you. I'm glad you're here. Sit here next to me, right?
Yes. And yeah, obviously that is metaphorical right now because none of us can actually do that physically. We actually have, it looks like a comment/question from someone. Daniel Dower is saying, I think it's so interesting you mentioned yearning. I think that yearning and isolation are such a part of ghost stories. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, isn't that cool, Daniel? And so yearning, I think, is essential to the way we write, too. So there's this book. I'm going to turn and look at my bookshelf and see if it's here. It is not. It is upstairs at my other desk. My other, as if I have multiple desks. This is my son's desk that I'm at. The upstairs is the dining room table, but it's up there. Robert Olin Butler has a book on writing called From Where You Dream. And he talks very much about how yearning is what drives all novels. But I agree with you that it becomes more overt when we have ghost stories. So much, not all ghost stories are the same, but so many of them are about things left undone, things we didn't say, regrets we have, and a yearning for connection that can no longer exist. I mean, even I was going to bring out a few ghosty books, and I'm looking. Okay, so like Jewel Parker Rhodes, Ghost Boys. I don't know if you know it, but the main character is a victim of a police shooting, and at a very young age, as a teenager. And there's so much more that he wanted to do, that his life is cut short for. And there's work that he can still do. And I think that's the other part about so many ghost stories, is that if they're from the ghost's point of view, there is something that ghost needs to fix or needs to make a connection in order to do. And this is one of those. Can I show a couple other?
Oh, absolutely. Ghosty? Please.
And also, Will Alexander's Properly Unhaunted Place, a whole town filled with ghosts and this yearning and this desire to fix. But I also think, because I write for kids, that yearning comes through in like the cousin of the ghost, and that's the imaginary friend, right? Yeah. The imaginary friend is the someone who can do all the things that maybe the main character longs to do, or who can be blamed for all the things that the main character feels bad about. So I love Michelle Cuevas' Confessions of an Imaginary Friend, and going even younger, and a perfect example of the imaginary friend being able to both take the blame, but also do things that the main character can't yet, are these books, Dory Phantasmagoria, which yes, I adore. But they do a lot of that too, and it's a different kind of yearning, and yet it is still to sort of be most fully yourself in a semi-acceptable way, someone who doesn't necessarily have to play by the rules or the expectations that other people have for them. I don't know, Daniel, if that really answered the question you posed, but I spent a lot of time addressing whatever my sideline view.
Yeah. Well, he actually commented, he said, so we fear zombies because we fear losing our humanity, and we fear vampires because we fear what we might want that's wrong, and we fear ghosts because we fear losing our ability to connect / to be, basically.
That could be. I think it's also really, really interesting. So this is a very ghosty moment in children's literature in particular. And there's a book by Justina Ireland, Marielle, if you remember the title of it, that's forthcoming.
Ophi's Ghosts.
Ophi's Ghosts. Sometimes we use ghosts to rectify historical wrongs as well. And so, yes, a connection, but also perhaps a recognition of the inability to change things in a moment, but the possibility perhaps that things can be changed after the fact. I think that's what Ghost Boys does as well. And, I think if we look at the history of the vampire story and vampire films, they express different fears too, sometimes really overtly. I mean, there was that rise in the vampire film during the AIDS crisis, for example, and there was a very different kind of cultural moment that some authors use vampire films to address, and vampire literature to address. With zombies, I agree with your assessment, and I also think there is this very thing that we're doing now, that sense of us becoming less our human selves, that zombie stuff is seeming to address, that we are more less individuals, more a mob, more desirous of brain.
He's also very excited about spooky books that fix history.
Yeah.
Like ghosts. And he says, thank you so much for answering.
Oh, gosh, thanks for asking. I love that kind of dialogue. And
Uh-oh. It appears we're having some technical difficulties at the moment. Linda, we've kind of... Okay, so I'm guessing it's just been dead air for a little bit here. We are having just a little technical difficulty right now with our author. And if you can hold on one second, I'm very excited about this book, and I really want to talk about it. So while we're in here and while we're waiting, since I might as well, just wanted to talk about Almost There and Almost Not and why I think everybody should love it. It is a great, really, I mean, I love ghost stories, guys, and this one is just a very different kind of ghost story. It can break your heart a little bit, but you'll really, really love it. You'll really, like I said, like I was talking with Linda about, you'll really love California. And I'm sorry, I'm not great at just ripping. And oh wait, something's happening, guys. We might be getting her back.
I'm so sorry. Things happen. Hold on. Should start in a moment. You see me now?
Unfortunately, oh, there you are. There you are. You're a little blurry.
I can't see you, but I trust you're there.
I am here, I promise.
See this?
Oh.
All right.
We've lost
I
you.
believe it.
You're a
but
little...
I'm just seeing. But I trust that you're there.
I'm totally here. Oh, but we lost you again. Oh, dear. Technical difficulties, guys. Not totally sure what to do. This is going to be a very interesting one. Oh, wait. Linda's coming back again.
I'm here. I'm so here.
You're so here.
I'm so sorry. I have no idea.
That is totally fine. That is totally fine. We've had technical stuff happen in the middle before. It'll all be good.
Well, I think we should blame some sort of haunting.
I think we should too. We absolutely should. Clearly, it was just like the internet ghost that is just trying to be ridiculous. So anyway, we can just jump right back in, really. So I'm so glad we fixed that. So I hope you guys are still like there and watching and like did not mind my very bad attempt at riffing, because I am not good at it. But so we were talking about like the ghost stories and the yearning, and also what I wanted to go into is like, this is there are ghosts, obviously, so it's a ghost story, but it's also, there's a lot of it's a lot of family issues, which is what this story is about, and about, California's relationship between her relatives, between, the ones that are alive and not so alive. But I really want to talk about like the interesting, very weird quirks you have for the ghosts, especially with her, what is it, triple great aunt Eleanor, who she poofs when she like actually poofs when she gets like upset, but whenever she poofs younger, and she continues to poof younger throughout the story. And like, I'm thinking that I saw that as sort of a way of like representing California's own character arc, because she is going to deal with like this idea, because the idea is that she poofs younger and younger. Well, eventually she's going to poof out and she's going to not be there. So like, was that your idea? Was that what you were thinking? How did you create it?
Yeah. So again, I was surprised the very first time that, great, we'll just call her Eleanor.
Yes.
When Eleanor got a little flustered, I was thinking of this very uptight, very proper, she speaks with a British accent, and I imagined her being like very, very dignified and fainting at things that were disagreeable or difficult, or she didn't want to deal with. And we think of that as being a part of a certain time and culture, like the fainting because something is too much. And yet we as adults do that to kids all the time, right? That's something we don't want to talk about, we don't want to deal with. We don't necessarily faint, but we close it down as quickly as possible and move on to something else that's more pleasant. And part of that is about protecting the children, right? And I do believe that we do need to honor kids where they are, right? So I'm not afraid to put anything in a book, but I'm also going to honor the 11 in a kid, and they may only refer to things rather than having to witness them, right? Or the language that I use may be such that kids who have experienced it see it one way, and kids who haven't can still understand the story, but maybe not to have to go to that particular place. But adults swoon all quite often. And so there was something about that was really appealing to me. And yet if they were going to come together, and if California was going to grow and see herself honestly, and be able to see herself as the kid she is, and not as the semi-adult that people wanted to make her, watching Eleanor go from that adult increasingly younger and younger and younger until she is almost the same age that California is. For me, was really underscoring for both of them the importance of being a kid and being honored as a kid and having the joys that are supposed to come with that. To having one's childhood. The fact that Eleanor swoons all the time and poofs into nothing and there's nothing but dust on the floor and, needs to reconstitute. I liked it too. I thought it was kind of funny. I thought it was quirky, but behind the quirk was something really real. Now, I will not lie to you, Marielle, and say that here in my notebook, like where I was planning everything out, I have that written down. I don't. It emerged over time. Because as I got to know these characters and what mattered most to them. And Eleanor is yearning too. She is yearning for the moment before her father sent her away to do hotel work. When she was still a child, when she had a beloved dog of her own, when she was still a child. And by knowing that was the most important thing to her and knowing that connection was going to be the most important thing to California, that quirky, funny, I hope funny bit brought the two together.
Yes.
Does that answer that question?
I think it does, yes, because I did actually think the way that she poofs is really funny, like, which nice because it kind of like obviously it's very poignant moments, very like deep in story, but that is sort of like a comic relief little bit where it's like, she just poofs and it's like, okay, well, all right then. And then I also did love that you added a ghost dog because I feel like there is this like security for a lot of people, kids or adults see dogs as security. Not everyone, but a lot of people. And it's like this, this nice extra thing where, oh, it's a ghost. It's like, oh, there's ghosts that I have to deal with, but I have this dog. I know it's a ghost too, but it's like nice and cute and like...
Well, and she's learning to trust, right?
Yeah.
And so the first thing that she can trust is this dog who does not reject her, right? And yes, it runs away, but it comes back. And if she could trust the dog, then maybe she could trust maybe the ghost, and maybe she can trust that girl that she meets who actually has a real body. Like maybe she could trust that. And all that way, she's also learning to trust herself. And to find some trust. But can we blame this girl for not having that innate trust when the grown-ups around her aren't telling her the truth?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I put a dog.
Yes, I love the dog. It's wonderful. And before you were actually talking about like how the first page of the book, oh my gosh, I just wanted to say to everyone, it was the first page. I read that and I was like, yep, I love this book. This is fantastic. Because it's like, I love California's voice is so great. And I also really love like how you add in like the letter writing. Because like some of it, it's been a while now. I know a lot of it's like California writing letters to like her aunt, to her dad. But there's also some letter writing that's actually that she finds that was written from Eleanor. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah. The premise is that she's staying with Aunt Monica. Aunt Monica's deceased husband, Milton, is actually related to the etiquette expert. And he had this dream of writing her biography. And he has collected documents that Aunt Monica's never really seen before. And the ghosts appear right after Aunt Monica kind of opens that box full of, we don't quite know this literally because California doesn't know it for sure, but I think the hints are there. We know that is where they manifested. And in that box are newspaper articles and some letters that used to belong to Eleanor, and in her youth, she was called Elsie, some things that relate to Elsie. And yeah, I think letters can be. Here's the thing I think about letters. I think letters are one of the ways that we project a persona. Letters are a really deliberate way to present ourselves to someone else. And when I am having a hard time writing, sometimes I will write a letter to my dad, who is no longer corporeal. I will write to my dad and I will say, "Dear Dad, I'm having the hardest time with this book because blah, blah, blah." And somewhere in that process of telling him my challenge as a writer and presenting myself as a writer, the story, many of my chapters have begun as letters to my dad that then sort of translate into the work itself. And for California, writing the letters first to her Aunt Isabel, her terrible Aunt Isabel, but then also finding other people to write to, including presidents of companies, and eventually to a fake version of Aunt Isabel that she is more like writing a diary. That's the other way that she learns to trust, I think.
Yeah, because I really enjoyed that because I do that too with some of my like dead relations, mostly my Nana who passed away like a year and a half ago. And I do that, and it is more like a diary thing, but I write it like it's a letter. And it's just helpful and it's nice, and I really liked seeing that in there. Like,
tell me what you write to her. How do those letters work for you in a way that's different from whatever else?
I don't know. Well, we were very, very close, my Nana and I. We bonded over our love of books. So a lot of what I write is I'm writing to her about what I'm reading. And that helps me to want to read more because then I feel like, well, I have to tell her what I'm reading. So it's like keeping up a conversation with someone who is no longer corporeal, who's almost there, but almost not.
But she's validating you, yeah. Right? Or you're getting validation for the things that you love by projecting who she is. Now, I'm really worried that I just broke up again and you can't hear me.
Nope, I can hear you.
Good, because you are frozen on my screen. So, but that's okay. It'll be okay.
Well, I can see you. I can hear you. Everything's still good. So,
but you're constructing a version of her that's related to who she is, right? Who loves you. Yeah. And it allows you to say the things that you want to say, you want to share. And it validates this version of yourself that we're just going to keep going back to yearning, Daniel, over and over. But is that part of that yearning to be honored for who you are? I think that's super cool.
No, it is. And I absolutely loved it. All right. So my next things are kind of similar because I wanted to ask you how you classify this story. Like, is it a ghost story? Is it reality? We kind of already went over that a little bit. Obviously, you can say more. And then just also, you've written a lot of other books for different age groups. And in a way, this kind of, not that I have very sadly not been able to read all of your other books. I'm very sad. But it seems to be a little bit of a departure just with the fantastical element of the ghosts. It doesn't it's always family issue-y kind of centric, but there's this element of the ghost. And so I was wondering, like, was that like, why did you decide to do it that way? Do you even see the ghost as a fantastical element or just like this, like, reality, and this is just, there's just like this extra layer of stuff. Like,
I see it as realistic fiction, and a couple of the characters aren't alive. And I think part of that, though, is because it is told in first person. Mm-hmm. And when I tell a story in first person, I'm telling that person's reality. And so it just doesn't feel like fantasy to me in the way that I have written one straight fantasy that my son begged me to write. It was when he was much younger, and he was like 9, I think. And he said, I like all your books. That's really great that you write these books, but I want you to write one for me. Huh. Like, what does that mean? And he said, I want you to write one with ham in it. I was like lunch meat? No, humor, action, and mystery. And he really wanted a fantasy. So I wrote a book that's called Milo Speck, Accidental Agent, about a boy who is sucked through a clothes dryer. He's searching for the missing sock into a world of ogres and discovers that his father is part of this sort of interworld secret agency thing. And it's fantastical. It's my kind of fantasy, so it's very broad and kind of funny. But even for that character, now that one's told in third person. So to me, that felt much more like fantasy. And yet the main issues were the same ones. They're about family. About where's my dad? Why couldn't he tell me the truth? How do I help him? He's trapped. How do I help him get out of this? And how do we get back to our house? And what do we do after that? How does our family work after we're back together? So for California, this is just real. And she's not even that surprised that a ghost appears, because people have been popping in and out of her life for a long time, and it is very real to her. And if you could take that tiny leap with me, that she's not two-faced early on, then I think you can see this as realistic fiction in the way that I do, and realistic in the way that she does.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's true, because honestly, when you read it, I mean, this is just so normal for her that you just automatically like, oh yeah, this is totally normal. There are people that poof, and that's fine. And it really feels that way. It sounds weird when you say it like that, but when you read it, it really gives you that vibe of, yeah, this is just real. This is real life, and this is what's happening. And it doesn't really feel fantastical to me. It feels wonderful, but not like there is, like, the ghosts are there, but it's like they're just not, they're family. They're just not alive anymore. It's like it's fine. And I think that's like a really great way to do it, and it's really done like really well now. Although now I want to read that thing about getting sucked into a dryer and younger people, because I'm like, okay, yes, I would love to get sucked into a dryer and do that. But that actually brings up an interesting point that I hadn't really considered. This is in first person, and fantasy, you said you wrote it in third person. Like, so do you think like one is better for certain types of genre, or does it just happen whatever?
No, so you mentioned that I teach at Vermont College of Fine Arts. It's a low residency program. I teach writers who are working on books for children and for young adults. And I honestly think that it depends on the story that you want to tell. For this book, it was really important for me that this book, well, first of all, it just appeared in first person anyway. I have had one other story that appeared in first person that I ultimately changed to third, and we could talk about that maybe if we need to. But when you write in first person, I think that choice has to be really deliberate, and it comes with a bunch of questions like, who is this person talking to? Now, some first person stories, they're not talking to anybody, and it's just a device, and that's fine. But a lot of times, I have some first-person stories here. So here's a book I love by Kelly Yang called Front Desk. This is a first-person narrative, and it's pretty straightforwardly first-person. This girl is a very reliable neighborhood narrator. She's telling you about her neighborhood and about the motel that she and her parents run. And while she is still a kid, with a kid's perspective, you can pretty much trust the facts in this book to be the way that she describes them. There's a few things she misunderstands, but for the most part, it's a first-person, straightforward, you can trust them narrator. And this book, I think, belongs in first because she has such voice, and you're going to need to believe that she is totally capable of doing some of the things that she does by the end of the book to sort of save the day. But there are other first-person narrators where it's important that the reader be a little bit wiser in certain moments than the narrator. So another book that I love, this one is by Alicia D. Williams, called Genesis Begins Again. Genesis, one of the threads of the book is that Genesis has very dark skin and she wishes it was lighter. And she does some really just extreme things to try to lighten her skin. And in order to have the sympathy, I think, and the empathy that we most want, that she most wants us to have, there are moments when we realize that the things that she's doing will be harmful to herself. And even a kid can see the difference between what she is saying and what is true, even though she is always telling you what she believes to be the truth. And that is important in part so that we can understand how many external narratives she has internalized, right? So, hang on. Then we have a book like Gary D. Schmidt's Okay for Now, another first person narration. I need to verify that. Yes. Doug lives in an abusive house, and his father's been pretty awful to him. And Doug has really low self-worth. And there are lots, he desperately, desperately, desperately needs you, the reader, to approve of him. And it is the last thing he would ever tell you. He does not want you to know. He would never say that out loud. And so Doug says lots of things like, and what happens next is none of your business. And I'm not going to tell you, right? Because he is defending himself throughout. And that's such an essential part of his character that the first person, I really think, is the best way to tell that. And I have one more. Do you mind, Marielle? I'm going off. But
perfect.
This is YA. This is E. Lockhart's We Were Liars. And in this book, the first person narrator, it actually starts in first person plural, which I adore, in order to set up this family lore. You know, we do this, we do that. But after that, it shifts to first person. And I will not spoil this book for you, but you must read it. She is an unreliable narrator, but she's not, hiding herself like Doug from you. She doesn't quite know the truth about her own existence. But over time, you as the reader start to be aware that what she thinks she knows is not entirely true. So those, I think, are really, really important reasons to use first person. In this book, I think that California's self-doubt, her belief is in herself is just trouble, and that no one would want to be around her. No family member would want to claim her. I felt like it really needed to be in her voice in order to convey that from the heart. It could be done in close third, but for this book, in order to believe all the things that she misbelieves about herself, I thought it was really important to be in first. But I will mention my book, Hound Dog True, is the one that I believed that I started in first. And that character is really shy. And she doesn't have a lot of interaction with other people. And she's also not very active. She lives in her head. And after 3 pages of all those negative I feelings, a reader would hate her. So I needed to make her a little, she sounded whiny and self-absorbed. But in third person, there was just enough space for the reader to see that she can't see herself clearly. So, long story. I also think, though, with some fantasy, third person works really well because a narrator can describe things that are fantastical, that are commonplace to the main character, and there's no need for them to describe it. So third person or omniscient really helps to display the world.
Yes.
Especially in middle grade. That was a long answer. How was that?
I think that was a great answer. Are you kidding me? That was fantastic. And yes, I totally agree with this. I mean, with Almost There and Almost Not, having it be in her perspective, oh my God, that makes you love her so much more. Like, I feel like you really wouldn't get her if it was third person because of how, like, she's very, like down on herself, but not realizing she's down on herself. Like, it's not like she's whining. She, like, just has this belief of that. And really, a lot of it is, like, that no one's going to accept her. Well, okay. Well, she's already had one aunt that kicks her out. like it's kind of a believable thing that, no one's ever going to accept me because clearly I have a lot of evidence that says that. And my first really people I can trust are ghosts. So yeah, which is, I love it. So this is another thing we were also kind of talking about, before we started and during, obviously this book deals with a lot of very deep issues, and I don't want to give away the ending because if you look for it, you kind of know where it is, but you don't totally. So I don't want to give that away, but it deals with a lot of issues like grief, loss, like big, like difficult issues. I mean, this girl has already lost her mom. Her dad is now off somewhere, and she's just getting shunted around to all these relatives who she doesn't really know. Which I think, this kind of stuff, happens to a lot of kids more than I think people realize that it does. And there's still this kind of idea in in the middle grade area to like shelter the children, but then they're not really seeing themselves, so then they don't know what's like, if but they are having these serious issues. I know, just from my perspective, when I was growing up, I would have loved books like this, but they didn't exist. There were no people where I could say, okay, I'm having this problem, but I don't have the words for it, so I can't explain it to you. And I really so I am always like, the best way to help kids deal with serious issues that they are actually having in their life, because as much as we don't like to think about it, there are a lot of kids that do lose their parents when they're young, which is obviously a very jarring thing to happen. Or they lose a sibling when they're 11, and then it's well, how do I deal with this? And they don't really have the words. So fiction gives them a safe haven to deal with these issues. And so in our area, we do have some groups out of school libraries for middle schoolers who are dealing with grief and loss. And so I wanted to know, is there anything that you would love to see us as booksellers, and you are a bookseller yourself as well, so to do to help get this book into the hands of kids who can really use and relate to it the most?
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to mention my book in this context, but I'm going to start broader.
Right.
It is true that there have been times when there have always been one or two books and one or two writers. Catherine Patterson is a great example, who did write books really well about difficult subject matter. However, we've also had a long history of trying to protect children. And we make the mistake over and over of conflating protection with erasure, right? Covering things up. We are most protected when we understand our circumstances. That's where we build our defenses. Not only that, it's where we build empathy, right? So you may not be that grieving kid, but that kid 3 desks over might be. And he's acting weird, right?
Yeah.
And you can't ask him about it. You're not supposed to talk about it. So how do you begin to understand what he's going through? Well, books are a really important and really safe way to do that, because they allow kids to process kind of in their own time and space. I don't know about you, Marielle, but I had books as a kid that were too much for me. And so I put them aside until I was ready for them. Or books that I read right through those hard parts without knowing they were hard because I wasn't ready for them. And kids are really pretty good about that, especially and more so with books, because they can alter the pace. They can put it aside for a while. With a movie, it's just coming at them. And that's not to put down movies. It's just to say that the book is a really special, safe processing place. And the other thing I want to say about having books that do these things is that I still have people who say, well, I don't think that Kate Messner wrote a book, her most recent book, Chirp.
Chirp, yes.
Right. Deals with a gymnastics coach grooming a young girl. And there were people who said that was inappropriate for a 12-year-old to read. Who do we think is being groomed at this age, right? It's 12-year-old girls. There were people who said she shouldn't have written the book. If we don't speak the thing, then we tell kids that their experience is unspeakable, right? That they can't talk to anyone about it themselves. This drives me insane. These books need to be there for kids who are experiencing it, for kids who might experience it, for kids who want to have empathy for those who do. And it's only by speaking these things and speaking them loudly that we teach kids that they can speak up when something happens to them. That said, for my own book, I think there are plenty of kids who feel an absence of connection for whatever reason. Sometimes they have parents like California does. Her dad is doing his best. He really is. It's just his best. It's not very great, but his intentions are good. And there are kids who love their parents, but feel that failing, who need to be able to talk and who need to feel okay in themselves. And a book can be the companion. A book can be the thing they trust, like a ghost dog, right? That they first feel that connection with, that they can build upon. And sometimes when we can't, I know this is true. I've had kids at school visits tell me, I asked my mom to read this, right? Or I had my friend read that. And it's because they couldn't say the thing that was mattering to them, but maybe the book could be like a letter that says, here's what I'm experiencing, or there's something about this that feels real to me, even though I haven't had this experience, and I want you to experience it too, so that maybe we can connect. So that's what I think is really important. And that is vital work that booksellers do, that librarians do, that teachers do, and in all honesty, that kids do for one another when we let them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I totally agree with that whole thing of like, man, because I know these books probably existed when I was younger, but I could not find them because I don't really think they were like on extreme display, really. Right. But one of the books, that actually reminded me of this other book that I read that is, it's called The 5 Things About Ava Andrews. I actually, it's relatively recent. It came out like last June. It's by Margaret Dillaway, and I loved it really because Ava is this girl who is extremely introverted and she suffers from anxiety disorder. So she has a lot of people, so she's not really great at talking. She feels like awkward, so it takes her more time than others to think of what she's going to say. But that gives her this apparent, she has a lot of people then who she doesn't really have any friends because either they think, there's like, she just doesn't like to talk, or they think she's like snobby and refuses to talk to people. And when I was reading her, I saw so much of myself as like a middle schooler in her. And I was like, when I was going through all this and my mom didn't know what was going on, but was so desperate to help me, I could have been like, here, read this. This is how I feel. Like, I don't know. I don't have the words. I don't understand. I can't explain, but this book explains everything. And that is like, and that's another thing which would be great for someone who finds almost there and almost not, who's like, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I need you to understand. It's a great way, I think. These types of books are a great way, not just for kids to understand, but also as a way for them to communicate with the adults in their lives about, this is what I'm feeling. I can't explain it to you because it's just, I don't understand all the words, but this book explains everything. So and I think it's great when I see these books. I love bringing them into the store. They're so good because there's always that like underlying of, this is a story and this is fictional. So it's a nice way to like explain all this, which is great, which I absolutely love. So yes. So thank you. So thank you for so much for writing a book like this, which is so needed. And so, wow. So on that very deep note, I'm going to go with another question, which is completely going off a completely different direction, I would like to know, who would you say is your closest authorial doppelganger? And you may have more than one.
So that is almost impossible, but because the doppelganger is supposed to be like kind of you, but I can tell you like who my cousins are, my authorial cousins are, like the people that I feel my books could hopefully, or I aspire to have them sitting on the shelf near one another. Some of the folks that I have learned the most by writing and that I feel a kinship with, Sharon Creech is one. And in fact, when I was first starting to write, I was only writing picture books. And I sent a picture book manuscript. The picture book writer, Lisa Wheeler, was generous enough to read something that I wrote. And she said, this is really funny. It's got a great character, blah, blah, blah. But it's not a picture book. This is maybe like an outline for a middle grade novel. And you should read some. And I just felt at the time like a middle grade novel that's so long. I'm writing picture books. That's 3 or 4 pages. How do you write something long? And one of the first books that sort of opened up that door for me was Sharon Creech's book, Granny Torelli Makes Soup. Do you know that one, Marielle?
I have heard of it. I've never had a chance to read it, though.
All right. This is I'm going to recite part of it for you. So it goes like this. Bailey, he said to me, Rosie, get over yourself, which wasn't a nice thing to say. Bailey, I said, get over your own self, which shows you how mad I was to say such a dumb thing. Okay, that right there, that's the whole first chapter. And I thought, I cannot write like a big fat novel, but I can write a chapter that long, right? And she has this great way with voice, and she writes spare. I mean, her later books, her first 2 books are longer, but after that she writes spare. And I thought I could maybe write something that could sit on a shelf next to some Sharon Creech and the way she writes about family. Another person, again, many people would say, well, that Urban thinks pretty highly of herself. I'm telling you who I aspire to be like, is Patricia McLaughlin. And that book, Sarah Plain and Tall, which I adore, 68 pages long, wins the Newbery because it is spare and short, and it is of the heart. And it is a small slice. Even though Sarah Plain and Tall, for those of you who don't know it, is this epic story of a woman coming from Maine all the way to Kansas in 1910 to see if she could make a difference in these people's lives. If it was written for adults, it would be 400 pages long, and half of those pages would be about the undulation of the prairie grass. But she writes this really slim, perfect, every word is perfect story. And I aspire to that as well. Laurel Snyder, I think, is someone with whom I share a sensibility, and I love her work. I love, even though our books are very different, I still love Orphan Island and Jasper June, and there's something about her play with language and rhythm and sound that I really admire and feel some sort of kinship to. And even though I am not a Southerner, Barbara O'Connor's books also feel like they're in the same bookcase as mine. So those women are sort of my book cousins, I think. I guess, can I add one more?
Absolutely.
It is, oh my God. So the books are Missing May and Mr. Putter and Tabby and why is her name is, she's right over there on my bookshelf, and yet the name, why can I not even say? Anyway, these books. Rose Town, I think, is her most recent. She's on my imaginary board of directors, and I can't even remember her name. You must have an imaginary board of directors, I'm sure.
Is it Cynthia Rylant?
Yes, Cynthia Rylant is on my imaginary board of directors because I admire her work so much.
Oh, that's great. That's actually really, that's so cool. I want my own imaginary board of directors. Come on.
It is so helpful, Marielle. So the other members are Fred Rogers,
Oh,
Linda Berry, Myra Coleman, and Twyla Tharp. And they each have a different function for me. So if I'm being lazy, Twyla will kick my butt. And if I'm not being child-centered enough, Fred will have a conversation with me. And if I'm being not true to my own voice, Myra Coleman steps in because she is so much herself. And when I'm truly, truly stuck in the world, Linda Berry says, let's just doodle a little together and it'll be okay. So you need one. They help.
We have a question from the audience. They're asking, is an imaginary board of directors?
That's what it is.
That's what it is, dude. It's just a way of a bunch of people that you admire in some way to get you to do things that you need to do. That's right. Oh.
And when I can't just check my gut, because sometimes I do, as a writer, as an author, there's like two parts of us, right? There's the author part and the writer part. And sometimes they don't work all that well together because sometimes the author part will say, you should be marketing yourself in a particular way. You should have a brand. You should be, writing a series, right? But the writer part of yourself doesn't respond very well to that should sometimes. Mm-hmm. And yet, sometimes those shoulds are really, really important. And they can help you stretch outside of your comfort zone. And so when the two are not getting along and my own gut can't guide me, I turn to the imaginary board of directors and we have a real conversation about what it is maybe that I should be considering when I make these choices. And I'm sure all of you could build your own imaginary board of directors as well. They're so useful, and it is a really useful way to, if you don't have a grandma to write about or to write letters to about your book choices, your imaginary board will meet with you, I bet.
That is such a lovely thought. Oh, I love that. I'm like, okay, I want people on my imaginary board of directors now. All right. So I just wanted to say to everyone out there who's watching, we're getting towards the end. So if you have any more comments or questions, please put them in now. But so Linda, I was wondering, is there anything new that you're working on or something that's coming out that you would like to or can share with us?
Yeah. Well, let's see. In the pipeline already, there is a picture book that will be called She Once Knit a Yellow Dress. And it is in some ways about my grandmother, but what it is really about is the stories that we tell each other. And it is filled with encouragement for kids to ask for stories of the people around them. Their abuela, their oma, their next door neighbor, Mrs. Kim. But all of those questions are prompted by things that I know about my grandmother. And that should be out, I think that's going to be 2023. It is with an illustrator. I don't know that I can share that part yet. That's coming. I also have a book that you're still struggling with the title. But it is a very young YA that right now is called Talk Santa to Me, but I think we're going to change that title too. But it is about a girl whose family owns a holiday shop and runs a school for Santa Clauses. And I actually went to Santa Claus school right there in Midland, Michigan myself to do the research. It was great. If you want to feel young and thin, go to Santa Claus school with 200 Santas. That will make you feel good. And right now I'm working on a draft of something that for me is really experimental. It is an older YA. I've never written for this age group before, and it is got some verse and some vignettes, and it is told in a non-linear narrative way. And it is kicking my butt right now, but I'm sticking with it. So we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Well, I am totally looking forward to all of those things. I will definitely be able to look out for all of those things because that all sounds wonderful. And all right, so we have come to my last question. So I wanted to know, what is one of the most recent books you've read and enjoyed?
Oh boy. Because I am writing in verse and in poetry, when I'm writing something, when I'm drafting something, I have to read books that are in some ways contributing to that voice and not fighting with that voice. So I have to be really careful about what I read. So I've been reading a lot of poetry and a lot of work in vignette, and many of those books are not new, but I have been reading Sandra Cisneros' House on Mango Street. I've been reading Ann Na's book. Is it Step from Heaven? Far from Heaven? Far from Heaven. I've been reading a lot of Jackie Woodson and the books that she has done in verse in particular. Also, I am teaching at Vermont College right now the picture book intensive. So I've been reading a ton of picture books. And my current favorite right now, Marielle, you may have to fill in the author and illustrator for me because I don't have it here at my son's desk. But it's called Kafka and the Doll. Do you know it?
I have not heard of it, but
so good. It is. It's based on a true event when Franz Kafka, the Metamorphosis, writing about all this dark, was nearing the end of his life. He would go to the park with his partner, and one day when they went to the park, there was a young girl crying, and he asked what was wrong, and she explained that she had lost her doll, Soupsy. And Kafka told her that Soupsy was not lost, that Soupsy was out adventuring. He just made this up. And he knew because he was a volunteer postman and he had a letter from her that he just didn't bring to the park today. So he went on and wrote letters from Soupsy to this girl. And we know this is true, but the letters don't exist and we don't know what the letters were. But this is a fictionalized version of that. It includes the letters from Soupsy. It is marvelous. And this is one of those books like what we were talking about that deals with difficult things, but only for people who are ready to see it. For a kid, a really young kid, for the most part, this is just a book about a girl who lost her doll and the doll goes on adventures and some guy, brings the letters. For adults who know Kafka, it's this really interesting, gentle look at him, and adults are aware that he's very sick and going to die. And that kind of hangs over the book in a certain way and gives it a certain weight and without crushing what a really young reader is ready for. I love it. You've got to read it.
It looks great. And I did look it up. Author is Larissa Thule and it's illustrated by Rebecca Green for anyone who's listening and sounds like, yes, must have that.
Must.
So that is awesome. That's so cool. Now I'm so excited about this. And now I can tell people because we've gotten a lot of people recently coming in asking about Kafka. So I can be like, hey, guess what? There's a picture book related to Kafka. So that is something so fun to know. All right. So last call, guys out there, if you have any questions or comments for Linda, because we're just about to wrap up here. And it looks like that is it. All right. So it was so great talking with you. And it was so great just talking with you about writing and books and all this fun stuff. And you are just amazing and awesome. And I just wanted to let everyone know that currently at Town Book Center, you can get Linda's new book, Almost There and Almost Not. It just recently came out. We do have copies available. And, it's also on Marielle's staff picks shelf because, of course, it is, guys. Pay attention. So please do stop by and pick it up because it is just a wonderful, wonderful book. All right. Well, I think that's it, guys. So thank you all so much for coming. And Linda, thank you again. So bye, guys. Bye.